You're not imagining it. Your digestive symptoms really do get worse when you're stressed. And it's not random either. Your body follows a very predictable loop. It's a hidden cycle between your stress, your brain, and your gut that most people have just never been taught. I'm going to walk you through exactly how this cycle works, how it keeps you stuck, and importantly, how you can start to break it. This cycle has 4 different parts. First is stress, then activation, dysregulation, and then finally reactivity. Let's walk through each of these parts of the cycle so you can finally understand in a more nuanced way why your symptoms behave the way they do. Most people with digestive issues notice the same kind of pattern. You have a stressful day or something throws you off and your symptoms get worse. Maybe it's bloating, cramping, urgency, constipation, diarrhea, whatever you deal with. But what most people don't realize is that those symptoms create their own source of stress and they can start a vicious cycle. And so this is why symptoms can feel like they are unpredictable or come out of nowhere. You can be eating the same foods, following the same routines, and the symptoms just kind of pop up. But the truth is, these changes aren't random. They're not imagined. Your digestive system is just responding to very real signals in your nervous system. And it's important to recognize that stress doesn't cause a digestive disorder, but it does powerfully shape how intense, how frequent, how severe the symptoms can become. And once you can understand what's happening behind the scenes, your symptoms can start to make more sense. So let's talk about what's actually happening inside your body when stress shows up. The second part of the GI stress cycle is activation. It's when your nervous system shifts into go mode. We explain what I mean by that. Your gut and your brain are in constant communication. They're talking all day long through nerves, through hormones, through your immune system. And most of that connection comes up from the gut to the brain instead of the other way around. And so when stress shows up, especially the low level, ongoing stress that so much of us deal with every day, this whole communication system shifts. Your brain starts to move into a state of preparation and protection, and digestion just becomes a low priority for the body at that point. We can think of your nervous system like it has 2 pedals, like a car. On one hand, you have a gas pedal, and that is what's called your sympathetic nervous system. And this part of your nervous system is in charge of the famous fight or flight reaction. And so that helps you deal with emergencies, of course, but more realistically in everyday life, it just helps you get things done. It helps you stay alert, get through challenges, deal with pressure. And on the other side, the brake pedal in your nervous system is called your parasympathetic nervous system. And instead of the fight or flight reaction, on the other side, it has the counter reaction, which is called the rest and digest response. And so this is the state your body needs to really digest well and completely. And so when the gas pedal is on, the brake pedal is off. Digestion only works really well when the brake pedal is applied, when the brake pedal is on. So when stress keeps your gas pedal pressed, your digestion slows down or becomes disrupted. When most people are thinking about or talking about stress, they're imagining something that is quite intense. Things like panic or racing thoughts, intense levels of anxiety, things that come from big life events like a job loss or conflict in a relationship. But most sympathetic activation is much more subtle than this. You can be in a low-level activated state and not even recognize it. You don't need to consciously feel stress or overwhelmed for your nervous system to be in that go mode. It often builds up gradually just from the demands of everyday life. And so the signs of activation can be subtle. It could involve trouble slowing down or relaxing, like a low level of restlessness for some people. You can have a sense of urgency. Maybe always find yourself pushing through things, shallow breathing or muscle tension, or can involve just being easily triggered and easily reactive. Modern life keeps many of us in an activated state without really even recognizing it. Constant notifications, packed schedules and calendars, rushing, multitasking, or maybe the internal pressure we place on ourselves. All of this stuff can tilt our nervous system towards the gas pedal. And when the gas pedal stays on like this, your digestion pays the price. Over time, living in it in an activated place can reshape how your guts and how your brain can function. And this activated state, when it becomes more of a baseline, that can lead directly to the next phase in the cycle. The third part of the stress cycle is called dysregulation. It's when the gut and the brain stop coordinating together in a smooth way. So this is technically called gut-brain dysregulation, and we see it across many stress-sensitive GI conditions like IBS, dyspepsia, reflux, and even conditions like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. Here's the key idea. Dysregulation is the shift where your gut and your brain stop coordinating well, and this leads to sensations feeling louder, your system can become more reactive, symptoms can become easier to trigger, and all of these things are not imagined. They're measurable, they're studied, and they're extremely common in GI conditions. So this gut-brain dysregulation causes real changes to both the gut and the brain. Let's start with covering the gut changes first. So there could be a number of changes that happen here. The first is the nerves in your gut can start to become more sensitive. This is a very well-studied pattern or phenomenon called visceral hypersensitivity. And this explains why normal functioning of the gut, moving food and gas through the system, can start to feel more painful and uncomfortable for people. The second is that the lining in your gut can start to become more permeable under chronic stress. And that can then trigger a low-grade inflammation activation, which can also, further and make symptoms feel worse. And then finally, there can be changes to motility. Motility is the coordination of digestion. It's how food and gas move through the system. So the motility can speed up, it can slow down, or it can become more erratic. And this can play a role in a lot of common symptoms like nausea, bloating, early fullness, reflux, constipation, diarrhea. Now let's touch on the changes that happen in the brain. One of the most consistent findings we see in digestive conditions is the brain gets worse at filtering out sensations that are coming up from the gut. So when this happens, just normal sensations that happen from digestion start to become uncomfortable or even intense. And the second change that we often see is your brain can start to become more sensitive. This is called central sensitization. It's like the internal volume knob on sensations gets turned up. So something that's even mild in general starts to become intense and urgent. And then finally, the brain starts to lose some of its ability to activate that brake pedal I was talking about before, that parasympathetic branch of your nervous system. And a big part of the brake pedal is something that's called your vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is very helpful for calming the stress response and also regulating inflammation. So when the brake pedal isn't working nearly as well, it becomes harder for the body to settle after symptoms and also to manage inflammation. So all of these changes make it so your system can be more reactive and also more vulnerable to stress. It's also why symptoms can start faster, they can last longer, and they can be harder to bounce back from. And all of these changes, they set up the fourth and final part of the cycle, which is called the reactivity phase of the cycle. So this is the emotional layer of this process. It's also one of the most powerful parts because our emotional reactions can quietly keep this whole cycle going. When symptoms hit, your body isn't just responding physically, your emotions are also playing a part. And that usually goes in one of two directions. For some people, everything ramps up. That's their reaction. They might feel much more compelled to fix and control whatever they can do to get the symptoms to stop. And this looks like worrying, overthinking, get hypervigilant and scanning the body, really jumping into planning, preparing, Googling, managing every little detail, again, in hopes of getting some form of control back. Your mind can speed up, your body can tense, and all of this makes it very easy to get overwhelmed in this kind of a state. Another common reaction is shutting down. So you pull back, you disconnect. You might withdraw, you might go quiet, avoid eating or avoid social plans. You can try and distract yourself or numb to escape the pain and the anxiety and the uncertainty of it all. Yeah. But this reaction, of course, has costs too. So it can become easy to feel alone or helpless or hopeless. And so both of these reactions are common and they're understandable. When symptoms get intense, we react, right? That's not a problem. That's normal. It's human. But each of these also does send its own stress signal back into the system and can feed right into the cycle. This is why the cycle can be so hard for us to break, especially if we don't even know this exists to begin with. Your reaction to symptoms can start to become a new source of stress, and it can keep the cycle going. So let's zoom out and look at the full loop. We have stress is where it starts. That leads to activation. Activation can lead to dysregulation, and dysregulation can trigger emotional reactions that feed us right back into stress. This is the GI stress cycle. So now the real question becomes, how do we break this cycle? And this is the hopeful part. So if dysregulation is what keeps this cycle going, and all the different forms of dysregulation we went through, regulation is what breaks it. And there are two broad ways that you can bring your nervous system back into a place of safety over and over and to break this cycle and keep yourself from falling into it. So the first type tools are called bottom-up regulating tools. They're from the brain up to the body. They're body-based tools and techniques. And they can shift your system out of an oversympathetic activation and back into rest and digest. Things in this category are like breath work and gentle regulating movement. And then the second category is top-down regulation techniques and tools. And these are tools that work through the mind by changing how you relate to symptoms, where you place your attention, and how you respond when symptoms do show up. Both of these approaches matter. But if you're dealing with digestive symptoms, then I would highly recommend you start with bottom-up regulation tools first. And one of the most effective go-to tools that a lot of GI psychologists use first with their patients is a bottom-up regulation technique called diaphragmatic breathing. So this is a type of breathing practice that is simple, it's effective, and it directly supports the pathways that influence digestion. And then once you get good at this, once you're used to using this type of a tool and your system is much better able to learn how to regulate, then the other top-down tools can be much easier to use at that point. So the most important thing I would like you to take from this video is this. Stress didn't cause your GI condition. This is not your fault. But stress does influence how intense and how persistent some symptoms can be. In a way, this is great news because unlike a lot of other things, this is something that you actually have control over. So, breaking the cycle starts by helping your system to regulate, to feel safer, and to go back into that rest and digest mode more often, especially when you're dealing with symptoms. That's what regulation does. So, if these concepts speak to you and you want to explore further, I've put together a simple resource, link below, that will be helpful.